We've witnessed more than 18 months of genocide in Gaza, a ceasefire that never made it past the first phase, an entire population, their fabric of life and their homes annihilated. Talks about what should happen next continue behind closed doors, but what happens then? Who will run Gaza and who can rebuild? I'm Stefanie Dekker and this is The Stream. Now, there will be a day the war ends. But is long-lasting peace possible without a proper political solution for the Palestinians? And regardless of words of shock and condemnation from the international community, nothing is really being done to stop it. Have we all become desensitized and almost used to the Israeli occupation? Let me introduce our guests. We have Dr. Mohammed Mustafa. He's a Palestinian doctor who was working in and around Khan Yunis in Gaza during the so-called ceasefire. He has recently left and offers first-hand insight into the humanitarian and political vacuum. We have Jenan Matari. She's a social media activist, producer and storyteller who brings a powerful grassroots and diaspora perspective. And Nizar Farsakh is a lecturer of international affairs at George Washington University and a former advisor to the senior Palestinian leadership. Dr. Mohammed, I want to start with you, but before that, I want to play a clip that you posted on your social media when you were in Gaza to give our viewers a sense of what you saw and how it affected you.
I don't know what to tell you. I was here in June. Nothing to this intensity. This is unbelievable, and the bombing is still going on. The rooms are still shaking. The screams are everywhere. It's insane. I need to just take 15 minutes or even an hour just to rest, to go back in there and go back down again. I feel awful to leave, but I've been there all night and I haven't stopped, and my legs are shaking and I feel dizzy and lightheaded. The smell of burnt flesh is still in my nose.
Clearly an extremely difficult situation for you. Israel says it takes the utmost care not to target Palestinian civilians. What have you witnessed and what would you say to that?
Well, I arrived before the ceasefire, and we were already seeing children with gunshot wounds to the head, single sniper shot wounds to the head. That was during the ceasefire. The night that the ceasefire broke, I was working at the Baptist Hospital, which is in the north of Gaza, and that's where most of the casualties had arrived. And within 30 minutes of the ceasefire breaking, the whole emergency room was full of women and children, and it resulted in us having to treat people outside the hospital, on the street leading up to the hospital, because there was just so many bodies. There was a school that was bombed nearby, and that's why there was just so many women and children. We had about 200 children killed in 2 hours that night. So it's very hard for me to believe that children aren't targeted when that volume of children are killed within an hour.
It's hard to believe, isn't it, that it's a year and 7 months, and yet the world pretty much remains silent when it comes to real pressure. Jenan, I want to move to you. You're very active on social media, trying to raise the voice, raise the Palestinian story. The Israeli propaganda machine is a powerful one. I wanted to ask you, have you encountered backlash online? And if so, how would you describe it?
Yes, it is quite the powerful monster. I think everybody who's vocal publicly has faced some sort of backlash. There have been attempts to dox me and other folks who speak out on social media. They go right for your business. They go right for your education source. The usual, I'm sure people have heard of Canary Mission. My face is plastered on that site, along with many other Palestinians and pro-Palestinian activists. They have a pretty consistent MO when it comes to targeting Palestinians online. And it's always to find a way to take away your source of income, take away your source of education, get you, if you're a student, they get you, expelled or suspended from school. They get you in trouble with, the dean of your school. If you are in the corporate world, they get you fired from your job. I have been in a pretty unique position in that I am quite a few years out of school. I work for myself. I have my own company. And so getting me fired from my job is something that's essentially impossible to do. So they have tried many times to shut me down, to shut others down. But this is why I stay active, because I know that I'm in a position of privilege, that I can continue to be loud and vocal about, my homeland and speaking out against these injustices. Because I know that not everybody is in the position that I am in, where I can keep going despite their attempts to shut me down and silence me and get me, in some sort of trouble.
Nizar, I want to pose a broader question to you. Israel has voted to expand its military operation in Gaza. The horrific descriptions Dr. Mohammed was telling us, the images we see online. I've been covering this conflict for 20 years. I've been going in and out of Gaza. I've seen the most horrendous atrocities. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. And I want to ask you, where is a solution for the Palestinians? Are we furthest away that we've ever been? Like, how would you describe it?
I wouldn't say we're the furthest. I guess I've been working on this long enough to know that things actually can change drastically from one day to the other. It is the most tragic, the most cruel it's gotten, but we also have had the success, let's say, of really showing what's happening, and there's a tectonic shift in the world where now Palestine is front and center for people around the globe, not just people who are pro-Palestinian. So the narrative, the Zionist lobby, as strong as it is, actually is losing the narrative because they're having to precisely use those very aggressive, very blunt force tools like getting people fired and silencing people. So the rest of the society is witnessing that. And that doesn't help your argument if you need to shut people up in society. So I think things are moving in the right direction, even if at an extremely, extremely high cost.
Dr. Mohammed, tell us a little about the destruction that you witnessed, because we talk about potential talks of a ceasefire, and when that day comes, it isn't going to be a celebration that everybody can just go home and resume their lives as normal. Describe to us what you saw when you were in Gaza.
I mean, the first time that I went, and this was 9 months ago, we drove from the European hospital to Nizar hospital, and on that drive we must have counted about 12 buildings that hadn't been damaged, and that was a 15-minute drive. There's almost nothing left in Gaza. People are living on the streets. There's not even any tents in Gaza. I was treating children that were falling out from buildings, from damaged buildings, because they had nowhere to go in the cold. They would sleep in these damaged buildings and they would collapse with children inside them. The state of the healthcare service is non-existent. We treat people in tents now. And like I say, because of the lack of facilities, because of so many have been bombed and destroyed, we're treating people out on the streets. And when we think about how Gaza moves forward, there is no vaccination program for children for the last few years. So there's going to be a lot of increase in these diseases, which is going to cause drastic changes as they grow up. The malnutrition has stunted so many children's growth as well, which is further going to cause huge implications and health problems for them in the future, that even if we were to invest billions in the healthcare system in Gaza, we still wouldn't even be able to keep up with the child amputees, the head trauma, the stunted growth, the congenital abnormalities that children are being born with right now in Gaza. So from a healthcare point of view, even if aid was to be unimpeded and we were to get the best healthcare in the world into Gaza, it would take decades to reverse the destruction that has happened to this population. And this is not even mentioning the mental health problems that the patients have got in Gaza. I remember at night walking through the wards and you would hear people screaming, and they would be people with PTSD. And because we would have no sedation or no sedatives, you would hear children screaming at night in the wards because they would be reliving their home being bombed and destroyed, and seeing their families burnt alive in front of them. So, you know, this is a huge problem for Gaza moving forward. Even if all aid was to be unimpeded and there would be peace tomorrow, there is going to be a long, many years of reconstruction and redevelopment.
I think it's also important to remind those of you watching that most of the times wars, people can flee across borders. When it comes to Gaza, people are penned in. They have nowhere to go. They cannot leave. It really is, it's an unbearable situation. Well, let's go to our correspondent, Hani Mahmoud. I just want to play a video he just sent in to us. He's, of course, been updating us since the beginning of this war. And this is how he feels about the situation so far.
I do feel abandoned by the international community, and not just personally, but on behalf of the people whose voices I carry. Every day I document the suffering of the children going to sleep without food, they're going to sleep hungry. The hospitals running out of medical supplies and running without electricity. The entire neighborhoods that have been turned into dust, and the tragedy of thousands of Palestinians missing and trapped under a pile of rubble for the past 18 months. All of this, and despite the scale of devastation, the world often looks away and speaks in statements that carry no urgency and no action. After 560 days of ongoing coverage and reporting from Gaza, I realized that Gaza is not just about death and destruction. Just a brief tour in its small neighborhoods, one would realize it's not just death and destruction. It's about the fathers and the mothers who share the last piece of bread with their children.
Nizar, I want to go to you after that. He talks about the world's silence. Of course, we all hear the condemnation, the shock, but there isn't any real pressure being put on Israel to stop this. Where would you say political will internationally, and also from the Arab leaders, is when it comes to really finding a political solution, making it happen, putting real pressure on Israel?
Unfortunately, you're correct. Part of the disillusionment and, in fact, the hurt that we as Palestinians are feeling is that we realize how much Palestinian lives don't matter. The same things that are happening to Ukrainians by Russians, for some reason, when it happens to Palestinians, they don't register in the world. There's an outrage over what's happening in Ukraine that is missing when it comes to Palestinians. Now, of course, we're not naive. We know there are political calculations. Different countries have their interests. However, it is extremely difficult to reconcile with a world that has centered, let's say, the suffering of the Jews in the Holocaust and those pictures of emaciated children in concentration camps in black and white. And then when you see that live in Gaza, there isn't that outrage. And I want to mention something also, that what people fail to understand, especially people who were not familiar with the conflict, is that this is basically a redo of 1948. We are where we are because 76 and so years ago, those Palestinians were kicked out of their homes, and the idea of having a United Nations Relief and Works Agency to take care of those until they get back to their homes. So thinking that after this war ends, we're going to see anything different, if not worse, is really unrealistic. And because you're not solving the problem, you're just putting a Band-Aid on a very big wound. And that's what really concerns me and worries me.
I think you made a very important point there about the value of life. 52,000, over 52,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza since October 2023. If you translate that to 52,000 Americans killed, 52,000 Italians killed, it sounds different.
It's not 52. It's not 52,000 that have been killed. The Lancet report estimated anywhere between 180,000 to 300,000 killed. And being on the ground there, the amount of bodies that we would see on a daily basis and the amount of people that would die from things like heart attacks, kidney failures because of the lack of dialysis machines, people falling, like I say, from collapsed buildings, people dying from infectious diseases from not having the right antibiotics. The death rate is a lot higher than 50,000. 50,000 is the death rate that they almost have been stuck on for almost a year because the counting system has been destroyed as well. The ability for the health service over there in Gaza to actually count the dead is also struggling as well to even count the dead. So we're looking at 180 to 300,000 dead. You also have to bear in mind that 50,000 doesn't even take into consideration the thousands buried under the rubble. And because there's no heavy lifting equipment, when we would get a mass casualty event and 30 people would arrive, they would tell us that in the house there was 100 people, yet only 30 bodies were brought in. So there were 70 still under there, and that was every day was like this. So I would even say that there's probably more people under the rubble than that we know of. So the death rate is much higher than 52,000, and it's been 52,000 for around that 40, 50,000 for almost a year, and it's way higher than that, a lot higher than that.
It's a very important point, actually, because, of course, nowhere is safe. You're absolutely right. You can't go and safely retrieve or excavate. Nothing works. Nothing is safe. So yes, one day, I don't think we'll ever actually get the real number, but certainly it's huge, and it continues to be allowed to happen. Jenan, online, you are very active. You have a huge reach. You do an amazing job. Do you get frustrated that somehow it's not translating? I mean, I know that there is an unprecedented change when it comes to criticism of Israel, for sure. The student protests in the US, a lot of Israelis don't like to travel abroad anymore because they feel that people don't want to see them. This is a change. But is it actually changing something for the Palestinians? Are you seeing that change, or are you frustrated?
I think it's a little bit of both. I definitely am seeing the change. I think that our cause has been, given so much more attention than ever in my lifetime, which is not that long. But, I speak to my grandfather, who's a Nakba survivor, and he tells me that he's never felt this level of support before as a Palestinian at 89 years old. So I know that something is definitely changing, but there is a level of frustration. We talked about the propaganda machine that comes out of Israel and the U.S. We should be seeing them as a joint team in everything that we speak of in terms of what Israelis are doing to Palestinians. It's only possible because of U.S. funding and U.S. backing, in addition to more Western empires. But when we speak to the propaganda aspect of it all, this is not just from 1948. This is, our timeline from the Nakba starts from 1948, but there were decades upon decades of propaganda, Zionist propaganda that was being instilled and dispersed throughout the public in efforts to, have this sign off of the colonization of Palestine, into the early 1880s. So there's also a moment of realization of how much effort and how much work still needs to be done because of how much has gone into getting us to this point today where we're watching Palestinian children being mass murdered on our cell phones and a live streamed genocide. That doesn't happen overnight.
I want to pick up on what you said there about the U.S. administration, particularly the Trump administration. I will move to you, Nizar. Before I'm just going to play a quick clip. I did a story in the occupied West Bank 3 years ago where the researcher told me that the land has gone, and particularly under Trump, then settlement expansion had gone at a rate that hadn't been seen before. So this is about the two-state solution. Many people online, especially on platforms like TikTok, believe that the two-state solution is dead. Why? Take a listen to this.
The two-state solution is dead, and here's why. Israel has systematically destroyed it with the help of the US by building illegal Israeli settlements, which are segregated Jewish-only communities built on Palestinian land in the occupied West Bank, which is against international law. They're forcibly displacing thousands of Palestinians in Area C, which is under full Israeli military control, and shoving them into Bantustans, mainly in Area A, so that these settlements can continue expanding. There are over 500,000 Israeli settlers living on the land that would be the Palestinian state in this two-state solution. Israel has effectively turned the West Bank into an extension of their settler colony.
Well, it's not just the occupied West Bank, it's also an occupied East Jerusalem. Nizar, we're running out of time. It's been such a fascinating discussion, but I quickly want to get from you, Trump administration, I know it's difficult to ask you this. What is Donald Trump thinking? What's going to happen with Gaza, the Palestinian issue? Because, of course, they have a lot of leverage, as Jenan was very well pointing out there.
So Trump in general doesn't have a long view. So he would like to help Israel annex the West Bank. For all intents and purposes, it is annexed. It's just a question of label. But if they don't get that, they're going to rearrange or configure what the occupation looks like. It will definitely not be sustainable. One thing I would want to say is that, I mean, I've been working on this for 40 years. Like, I kid you not, every year there is a superlative of this is the unprecedented number of settlements, unprecedented number of land confiscation. I think it's not helpful to follow those superlatives. We just need to realize that we are in a different situation, a different landscape, and we need to use the correct tools for that landscape. And currently, it is the fact that there's a whole globe that's been comparing what they see in the mainstream media with what they see in social media, and are asking themselves or realizing that this is not self-defense. That is something, people making the connection that the support for Israel comes from big business, from the industrial military complex, and so on, is putting the fault lines in the correct places. So there is a lot of work that we can do there, and we should be doing.
You mentioned there about descriptions. I remember covering Gaza many, many times in the UN. We used to report this, that the UN says that Gaza will become unlivable by 2020. And we reported this years ahead of 2020. I was there in 2020, and now we're 2025, and Gaza has pretty much been obliterated. Dr. Mohammed, how does it make you feel, having witnessed everything that you have witnessed? You have tried to fix what seems to be an unfixable wound of also pain and despair of the people of Gaza. What is your message to the international community, who every so often gets upset and condemns? Is that enough?
It's certainly not enough. But look, I think, in 10 years' time, the whole world will say that we're always against this genocide and we're always against this occupation. And I think a lot of people are beginning to jump ship and switch boards because they realize that the project of this occupation is no longer viable. It's no longer commercially profitable, and it's no longer in the best interests of anybody around the world. When I witnessed the slaughter of women and children at such large numbers, I realized that this is not an entity that's in control of what's going on. This is an entity that's lost control. And that's the way most of the doctors that I was there viewed it. We were just seeing people killed for no reason. People stood in lines waiting for food, people waiting for water, women and children by the dozens. So I think this is like the other guest said, this is a changing time, and the landscape is going to change very drastically in the next couple of years. What it looks like, I don't know, but I just hope the killing stops soon. Just hope the killing stops. I think that is a very powerful message to end
this episode of The Stream. Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, Jenan Matari, and Nizar Farsakh, thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks for being part of the conversation, and I'll see you soon.